Well, I had originally planned to do a squash planting video today, but it's just way too wet. I can't even get in there and get my ground prepped, much less plant some squash. You can see here in this tater plot where we planted our taters last week, we got standing water in this plot and over here in this plot. Just too wet. So instead of planting anything, today I figured it was a good day to talk about our crop rotation and our crop planning among all 10 of the subplots we have right here. We'll talk about what we had planted there last spring, summer, fall, winter, since we're growing food year-round here, and just kind of how we work out that schedule and determine what we're going to plant next in a plot to make sure we have a good rotation. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and that bell button so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you're a frequent viewer of our channel, it's always good to have you back. So crop rotation. Why is crop rotation important? Why do we want to make sure we don't plant the same family of crops in the same spot in consecutive years? So certain families of crops are more susceptible to certain diseases and insect pressures than other families. And if we plant the same family in the same spot year over year, we're going to have those disease and those insect problems just multiply and get worse and worse year over year. But if we rotate our crops, we can give that plot a break from that crop family for a year, two, or maybe even three, and it's going to drastically reduce our disease and insect pressure and make gardening a lot easier for us. So whether you've got an in-ground garden with several different subplots like I do, or you've got a raised bed garden with several different raised beds, or maybe even a container garden where you've got several different pots, you still want to make sure you rotate those crops and don't plant the same family in the same container or plot or raised bed year over year. Now ideally, I like to be on a 2 to 3 year rotation, but we can't always make that happen here because we only have so much space. So my goal is to at least not plant the same family in the spot in consecutive years. If I can stretch that out and not plant the same family in the same plot in 2 to 3 years, that's even better. But we just do the best we can. So in addition to having your garden broken up in subplots, a couple other things we can do to help crop rotation. One of those is cover cropping. Cover crops kind of help refresh the soil, reset the soil, and are going to allow you to have a closer or smaller window where you can go in and plant that family in that plot again. Another thing you can do is just plant a wide diversity of crops. If all you plant is squash, beans, and corn, it's going to be pretty hard to rotate because you're just working with 3 families there. So I always encourage people to plant a wide variety of things in their garden because that's going to allow you to rotate more successfully. So we've got 10 plots here on my homestead that we're going to be talking about today. We've got these 6 plots here in the dream garden that are all 30 by 35. And then we've got 2 plots over here behind the dream garden. This one here is probably my biggest plot. It's about 40 foot long by about 60, 70 foot wide. And this plot over here is about 50 foot long by about 20 foot wide. And then the last 2 plots over here on the other side of my barn are where we planted our potatoes. We've got this small plot here, which is about 20 by 30. And then this longer plot behind it, which is about 20 by 60. So now let's go to the drawing board or to the sketch pad and map out what we have planted in each plot in the last year and figure out what we should plant in each plot this spring. Okay, so I've got my dream garden layout right here, and these squares aren't perfect. I'm not the greatest artist in the world. That side of my brain doesn't function very well. I've got up top here what I've planted in each plot in the last year, and then down here is what we're planning on planting this year, and I'll go over each plot here. So let's start over here on the right side of the dream garden. So last spring we planted squash. I should add cukes there too. We planted squash and cucumbers in that plot. Those just did okay. We followed that with a cover crop of sorghum Sudan grass, and then this fall we planted some brassicas in there, and we've got a few rows of leeks planted in there now. The brassicas are almost gone. The leeks will still be there a little while, but this is where I'm going to plant my okra, and I'm going to do like a trial with several different varieties of okra, the jambalaya and some of these new varieties we've got, and see which ones I like better. Now, this plot here, we had our potatoes planted in the spring, and then we followed that up with some okra that we let grow all the way until the frost got it. Right now there are some brassicas in there. I had some broccoli that just did okay, some rutabagas that did really good, and I got some kohlrabi that I need to harvest and get out of there. So this plot here is where we're going to plant our squash and our cucumbers this spring. Summer squash, several different varieties, zucchini, patty pan, and then some pickling and some slicing cucumbers. Going over to this plot here, this is where we had our tomatoes planted last spring. Then we did a cover crop of sun hemp on this plot to help build that soil. Right now we have carrots and beets in that plot. We're getting those out of there by the week. They should all be gone within the next few weeks. So we'll start planting some beans in there and plant more beans as we get more carrots out of there and kind of open up some space. This plot up top here in the Dream Garden, we had our peppers and eggplant planted in the spring, and around here those things grow for many months out of the year. So they grew up until the first frost date there in November, early December or so. We've got a cover crop of winter rye on there now, which should be adding some good nitrogen to that soil, and this is where we're going to plant our sweet corn. This plot down here is where we planted our incredible sweet corn last spring. We then did a cover crop of buckwheat, followed by a cover crop of sorghum Sudan grass, and then we planted cabbage, kale, rutabagas, and cauliflower in this plot. All those did really well, and this is where we're going to plant our peppers. This plot right here, we planted winter squash in last spring. We did some small wonder spaghetti squash and some kabocha squash. We then planted a cover crop of brown top millet. Now it has brassicas in it. Still has some collards and kale that'll keep growing well into the spring and through the spring. We just planted some carrots and beets in this plot on the last video. I should have wrote that down there. So this plot here is just going to hold on for a little while. Once some of this stuff is finished later in the spring, early in the summer, we might find something else to do with this plot. But we're just going to let this one stay like it is for right now. So that's what we've got planned for our 6 Dream Garden plots. Now let's talk about those 4 other plots. All right, so this is our biggest plot right here. Last spring we had some squash in there, some cukes, also some flowers, but we don't really consider those in the rotation. Right now we've got lots of alliums in there. Between those squash and the alliums, we did do a pretty long-term cover crop of sorghum Sudan grass. But right now it's full of alliums, onions, garlic, shallots, leeks, all that good stuff. So those will be wrapping up probably around May or so, which is perfect time once it warms up to plant sweet potatoes. So we're going to do a big plot of sweet potatoes in that plot. We'll also put a lot of our cut flowers in that plot right there. This plot right here is pretty close to where my beehive is, so we get those flowers in there, keep those bees happy. This plot right here, which is just below that one, we had brassicas planted in there last spring. We've had lettuce planted in there this fall/winter. In between there, we did a cover crop of sun hemp. And this is where I'm going to plant my tomatoes and my eggplant this year. I haven't grown tomatoes or any nightshade in this plot right here for about 3 years, I think. So this should be a really good plot for tomatoes and eggplant. Over here are these 2 plots where you saw us plant those potatoes on a previous video. So last year we had shallots in there, some brassicas, some collards, We had okra in there for quite a while until the frost got it. We've got potatoes in that one now. Once those potatoes are done in May, I think I'm gonna do me a big plot of those Cherokee tan pumpkins. Those things are pretty resilient and they'll be able to handle some of that summer heat. So once those potatoes are harvested, we're gonna plant a big plot of winter squash / pumpkins with those Cherokee tans. And then this plot down here, we had sweet potatoes in last year. Then we followed that with some brassicas and beets. This is where we did our beds of greens that you may have saw us plant on the video. Had some beets in there as well. Still got one row of beets to get up. Potatoes are in there now, waiting on those to come up. Not sure what I'm going to do with this plot after the potatoes are up. I might plant me a second round of squash and cucumbers in this plot here, since I've never planted anything in the cucurbit family in this plot. All right. So this is what we're planning to plant this spring. Now this is not set in stone by any means. It could change slightly, but for the most part, we'll stick to this diagram or plan here. And I encourage you to do the same, whether it be on a little sketch pad or whatever, or you can take your phone and make little video journals, which help you to remember what you planted and what you're going to plant, but try to keep some record of it so you can keep up with it and have a better crop rotation. Hopefully we can get some dry weather pretty soon here. We can get these soils to dry out a little bit and we can start getting some of these things planted. We're going to start off with our squash and cukes, then we'll do our beans, then we'll do our sweet corn. By that time our tomatoes should be ready to transplant, peppers and eggplant. Then we'll get our okra in the ground last because, you know, it likes those warmer soil temps. We'll get our okra in the ground, and then come May, like I mentioned, we'll get those sweet potatoes in the ground. And somewhere in the middle, we'll be putting in several rows of cut flowers to, you know, help our pollinators and also increase our beneficial insect populations. So if you haven't started planting your spring garden yet, it's time to get on it. I'll put a link below to all our garden seeds, and that may help you out a little bit. You can kind of figure out what specific varieties you want to plant in each plot, and make sure you have some kind of rotation there. Don't plant your tomatoes or your squash in the same spot year over year, because that insect pressure, that squash bug pressure, is just going to get worse and worse and worse if you do that. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give me a like or a thumbs up on this video. And if you enjoyed this one, I think you'll enjoy these two videos right here. So check those out, and we'll see you next time.